Hi, Ms. Lancaster here. Just a quick introduction to chapter 6. This is our chapter on deviance. Okay, so as you're reading through this chapter, really kind of thinking about the sociological idea of what deviance is. Think back to chapter 3 when we learned about norms. Okay, norms are those expected behaviors that exist within society. Deviance is when those norms are broken. Okay, so a lot of times people will focus on crime when they're thinking about deviance, but that's only when you break the law. So that's that one type of norm that we talked about where it's encoded in by the governing source into our society. But there are norms that are like folkways, right? Don't pick your nose in public. When you pick your nose in public, you are actually being deviant. We don't think about it that way because of the lack of sanctions that are attached to it. But it really is the reality that most of us will conform most of the time, but all of us are deviant in some ways. Okay, so recognizing that from a sociological standpoint is kind of important as you're reading through this chapter. Again, crime is where most people go because it's the most clear type of deviance because you've broken a law. But that is just part of society, just one very small aspect with the criminal justice system. So when the criminal justice system gets involved, that's when it's crime. Okay, so this chapter is pretty theory intense. So you'll be looking at theory, functionalism. Within functionalism, you'll be looking at like social control theory and strain theory, understanding how at that macro level we can look at how the structure of society shapes and influences what is deviant and how we see deviance. Then when we think about it from the conflict perspective, thinking about how inequalities are at play, recognizing that inequalities do shape and influence what is considered deviant, and then also deviant behavior. Sociologists tend to focus more on the societal groups rather than the individual. We don't say that there is no deviance based on psychological factors, but we don't focus on that aspect. We're going to focus more on the social factors that shape and influence deviance. At the micro level, you'll be looking at more of the symbolic interactionist perspectives, two specific ones, labeling theory and differential association theory. So understanding those and how those can explain why individuals are seen as deviant or why they act deviant and how they learn in many ways to be deviant. So the last couple of things that I want to kind of touch on are the actual labels themselves. You'll see the section on stigma and in-group orientation and passing. Okay, we oftentimes think about passing. When we think about that, we think about passing in relationship to race, which that's we'll discuss that in chapter 8. But passing can also exist very much within any group. So reading through that and thinking about the deviant identity that exists. And then the end of the chapter really does get specifically into crime, recognizing the difference between violent crime, property crime, white collar crime, and then what the criminal justice system does to attempt to reduce crime with their different forms of deterrence, retribution, incapacitation, rehabilitation. So read through your chapter. Let me know if you have any questions. There's a lot in it, but for the most part, thinking about what norms are and how deviance is ultimately just the breaking of a social norm. Okay. Hope you have a great day.